Da-da, butterfly bites on July 4th.
Oh, welcome everybody. This is our 4th of July episode. As you can see, Michelle and I are like in full like patriotic theme. I mean, come on. How many times do you get to wear something stupid and just be like happy? Whatever. So welcome everybody for joining. We're really excited to kind of take a lighthearted podcast today and talk about independence and how it relates to AI. Super excited to have another episode and to talk to Michelle again, because it feels like it's been a while. Some of these podcasts I've been doing by myself and it's just not the same. So Michelle, I'm so happy to have you back. Can you share like what, maybe like a meaningful 4th of July moment that you had, or like what's going on with you, or just, anything you feel like sharing?
Oh, I already thought just as you said it. One that I'm hoping we'll talk a little bit that relates to one of the things we'll talk a little bit about. One of my favorite July 4ths was post university, right? So had graduated from James Madison University in lovely Harrisonburg, Virginia. Go Dukes. And and I was a little sister of a fraternity, Pica. I was a founding member of our sorority, Alpha Phi, and we used to hang out with the Picas a lot. And I ended up having a Pica as a roommate after college, living in the DC area in Northern Virginia. And we all got together because we were still connected, and a lot of people, from Virginia went to JMU, go to Northern Virginia. That's DC, right? Like Washington, DC, our nation's capital. That was,
Yeah.
I mean, you could keep going to New York, where of course the lovely Statue of Liberty is, but and so much more. But here we were so close to DC. And so that's what you do. You go to DC and then you go to the mall, which is, where the National Monument is, the reflecting pool, all the way up to the Capitol, the White House. I mean, it's all right there, right? The Smithsonian, you're there. And then they put on the fireworks from there. So you picnic all day, on the lawn, tons of people. And you're kind of like traipsing through the city to get there. It's always some kind of crazy hike. And then they do, of course, the music with the fireworks experience. And one of the years they did Grateful Dead. I think they had done Touch of Grey. This is probably like a little bit obviously this is the 90s, not obviously, but now and they did, I think it was like Touch of Grey, one of their more commercially famous and well-known tunes. And I'm this huge Deadhead, and we were all big Deadheads, all of us, 20-year-olds, post-college. The world was at our fingertips. We're in the heart of America. And then of course, we got home and then, probably played beer pong.
That's amazing. That's a really good memory.
Yeah. How
Oh
about
my
you?
gosh. You were making me think about like different fireworks shows that I've been to that were really meaningful. The first one I thought of that was like terrible, that I just remembered almost like PTSD about it, because you mentioned DC. So when I lived in San Francisco doing the whole like, you know, I don't know, whatever you call it, Silicon Valley, if you call it that, but like that hustle and bustle, that like rat race, when I was doing that, they had a
The Valley.
They had a fireworks thing at the pier, and I don't know what I was thinking.
Fisherman's Wharf in San
Yeah,
Francisco.
yeah. I don't know what I was thinking of. Like, I guess I'd never done a big event like that at a city, so I just thought we were just gonna roll up and just like get our stuff and just go. But it was like $50 for parking, took forever to walk. It's so crowded. And then
Parking.
on the way back, I think it was like 4 hours it took before we could actually get home after the event.
Yeah.
But my favorite,
Like that
I was
in DC too, though, by the way.
I'm sure. So, like, probably was like 8 years old, small town, teeny. I think Carlsbad, New Mexico, like teeny town. And they had a little, they call it the beach, but it's just this tiny little river off wash that was there, small. I don't even know how many thousand, this small town. And they did a fireworks thing, and it was probably nothing, but because I was young, fireworks are just so magical and just so like, I don't know, it just, all your thoughts stop, all the like worries of the day or whatever stop, and they're just there, and they're just so awe-inspiring and beautiful. And so yeah, I like kind of a smaller crowd than a bigger crowd?
Yeah, I like both. I mean, I grew up with smaller crowds and I hated the sound. I was one of those really
Mhm. Sound sensitive. Yep.
sensitive
I get
sounds.
it.
So, I don't know where we'll see the fireworks this year, but I will say here now, now I'm out here in California in the Valley. I mean, technically, I'm north of San Francisco, but the fireworks they do over the San Francisco Bay can sometimes be impacted by the marine layer. I
Uh-huh.
mean, I've experienced July 4th in San Francisco where I literally could not see my hand in front of
Wow.
it
Yeah.
was fog.
Mhm.
But it appears that with this heat wave, we should have a weather segment on our podcast. Um,
Oh, man.
with this national heat wave that we're experiencing in the Bay Area, I think it's going to be completely clear and beautiful. So I'm wishing the same for you.
Oh my gosh. This little sparkle thing is super
I
uh,
love it though.
it's hot. Speaking of hot, it's hot in my office. So, okay, we were thinking about how we could tie together like AI and technology and independence, and because that's really the spirit of this holiday is like independence and freedom. There's so many directions we could go, but I thought I would give you the chance to start first and sort of like, what do you think about when you think about technology and how it impacts independence? And I know you have this really like fabulous perspective about how all of this stuff is trained on knowledge. I won't share is still your thunder, but go ahead and share what you were telling me before we got started.
Yeah. So, I mentioned the Grateful Dead. So obviously I'm a Deadhead. And grew up in DC, very, political arena. My father was Sergeant Major in the US Army. So, I had a lot
Oh, I
of,
didn't know that. Wow.
yeah, I had a lot of the just the structure of the government, the systems of the government, policy, politics really drilled into me. Good thing. It was interesting to me. Um,
Mm.
and so after college, I mentioned, up in Northern Virginia, DC, I was working at this company and I ended up finding, and this was like right as the internet was booming and trying to make this a shorter story. Um, I ended up finding communities online where fellow Grateful Deadheads were. And they
Mhm.
were, one of the things about the Deadheads that's unique and that has caused a lot of success. And I think a lot of people are seeing it now with them being at the Sphere in Las Vegas, and being much more commercialized through Dead and Company. Many generations appreciate the Grateful Dead. But so here I am, Deadhead, looking online, seeing these communities. Part of the ethos of it was the taping of the music at these shows. And the Grateful Dead made a conscious decision to allow this access to their shows, right? So their music, their lyrics, the way it was being played at the show, which was also very much inspired by the people at the show and the vibe.
Mhm. Yeah, of course.
And this, sort of ground level word of mouth united people, and then it created a following. It created the Deadheads, and they would trade these musics and they would relate on, oh, I was at that show, or you remember how Jerry,
Oh,
Thea was on, this Althea, my favorite song. And so anyway, I just always there I was in DC. I saw that then now they were able to connect online, and I was like, this internet thing is going to be huge. And what I also loved about it is that it inspired this access to information ultimately, right? So
yeah.
it was being put on analog, right? There was no digital really. Yeah, I mean we do have videos, but not like, YouTube online videos out there that,
Right.
right? Those
4K.
right, those are on devices or somebody's own little personal computer at home, right? Um, which is why, probably people were trading CDs, for the Grateful Dead. Um, so all of that, just recognizing that, that access to information united people. It ultimately created a following and a place where people could find their independence. they in America could pursue happiness, which for them was the music. And then they found ways to make money. You know, there a lot of clothes, that the fashion style. I mean, and not to mention that the Grateful Dead really is a representation of what was happening in the San Francisco Bay Area in the 60s and, you know, during the Vietnam era, when what had happened is it was the first time that a war had truly been televised on television. And that meant that more people had access to information to understand the impact of the war, right? And a lot of the music that came out of that time was about the revolution of a lot of young people who were seeing this and saying, wait, whoa, I didn't know, you know, and I want to have a say in this, and maybe some
Yeah.
for us. And, you know, and so that's another thing about the Deadheads that, you know, I don't know, it just really connects with me. And my father did a few tours in Vietnam, so who knows? I don't know. Um, and, you know, it's information was already spreading beyond the way that it originally had been shared on, you know, caves and paper and history.
Yeah.
So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, now, and the music of the Grateful Dead was just, and I think, I mean, this is my opinion. You might find it written somewhere. I'm not sure. I mean, a lot of their lyrics are drawn from epic poetry, American poets, English poets. You know, of course, we declared our freedom from England. So it's just interesting. There was this melding of stories that also incorporates gods and goddesses from like Greek mythology and, you know, Roman mythology, right? Like these were just songs that were created based on previous lore that had been shared via word of mouth. And so
Yeah.
I feel like the Grateful Dead was like, well, we're just experiencing and sharing our talents with this music as vessels. You know, sure, maybe we created some songs based on initial lyrics, but a lot of those lyrics also began here in America, and the music that they played was revolutionary. It was like rock and roll, and it also represented the blues, which was
Yeah.
fundamental in also our American history during the slavery era, and the ways that people found to come together around music and ideas to rise and cause. That's the beauty to me of America, is this: we have this independent spirit that is based on this notion that we have a right to pursue happiness, and by doing that, we can be connected by a variety of things. It doesn't have to be one particular religion. In fact, you can have your own religion. I mean, there's so much at the heart of America and democracy that I see um, and have experienced to date, that I see now digitally. We're at, you know, we're at a nexus. We're at this really convergence of
Yeah.
analog and digital and physical and word of mouth. And it's really important as we lay down these digital histories and we talk about our communities and we show how we experience life emotionally and, you know, whatever, right? Like all of that needs to be covered within AI. And I just, you know, I think as we continue to make the progress in it, like we have been, I hope that we'll see some more people rising up to stand up for ethics around AI. I hope we'll continue to see more representation of women in the boards of these large technical institutions that are right now really looming large and
Right.
making decisions for us.
Our lives.
And yeah. And, you know, because the internet has been a revolution that started in America and is global, right? I mean, there was always a global notion to it. But as AI is accessing information, you know, we want it, of course, faster, better, stronger, and that's going to cost more money. Well, we're already starting a hierarchy of people who may or may not have access to information. You know, like what happens if one day they go, oh, okay, well, we know that AI will hallucinate because that's how we set up the LLMs. But the more that we refine it, the less it will happen. But that costs more. So I'm going to have richer person, whoever that is, going to have the access to the 99% accurate, where the general public's going to have 75. It's like,
Yeah.
that keeps people in ignorance, and that has
So,
been
like,
used.
we're repeating ourselves. It's like back in the medieval times, I think it was, where they tried to get people not to learn how to
And
read
slavery.
because they didn't want them to have the knowledge. So there's
Mhm.
2 main things that I wanted to highlight from what you
Thank you
said that I
for
really
that,
love.
Sharon.
The first is you're talking about using lore and stories and poetry and evolving that into like new works. And it's funny because I just posted this like little 5 minute, I'm trying to do like shorter videos on LinkedIn just to see what that feels like. And I did one on derivative content. I don't know if you saw it,
Not
but
yet.
like Adobe and Meta are saying like they want access to the training data so they can create derivative content. And on one side of it, it feels like they're stealing the intellectual property and the creative work, but on the other side, it is the natural creative process to derive new content from old stories. And like there's, what is it, like there's nothing new under the sun. There's like I don't know where that comes from, but that's a quote. So it makes me think about that. The other thing I really like about what you said is, especially for any of the people watching this that are not from America, we've got this America as a country, and then we've got freedom as like a concept, and patriotism as like action or whatever. These different super like high level like like non-tangible like ether like type of concepts, but there's humans, there's real people and history and music and subcultures and all these different things that make it up. And so when you were talking about that, I was thinking about, well, what does that do that gives people identity, but it also can cause friction and strife because we're different, right? We might find our little sub communities, but we're different. And it's easy to look at the things that are different and cause fights and wars and all those sorts of things, even though, I think war is much more of a financial gain than it is really about getting along with other countries. But that's a totally different topic.
Right.
But one of the things that AI can do is because, I've seen it do like conversationally, like mental health support, like telling people like, oh, like I wrote one was like, you're a friendly best friend, you got it, girl. Don't worry about him. Forget what he said, like just all those different things. So it's really good at kind of the human condition of how we interact with each other. And so, you
Yeah.
know, you could use it to bridge gaps between people, to help with negotiations, to like deal with conflict resolution, and all about getting to unity. So, we are the United States of America. So we talk about freedom a lot, but we don't really talk about the unity part a lot. And I think that's missing. And I think that's really important, even now with like how the politics are so polarizing and fragmented. If we could get to a sense of unity, I think that would be valuable for us, like as a society.
Yes.
Um, so the next thing I was going to ask you is sort of like in this idea of freedom, because I actually asked Chat GPT, like, give me some topics or questions to see if there's anything interesting it could come up with. And one of the things that it mentioned was like, what is freedom to you? And does technology and AI make us more free? Because people talk about that, like, hey, it's going to do my dishes and laundry so I can do more art or whatever. I'm sure you've seen that quote everybody's sharing. Do you think it makes us more free, and or do you think it makes us slaves, like the people, the zombie world that's just on their phones constantly that never looks up?
It's I mean, it's hard, I think, to choose one or the other. I think we've got a little bit of both that are happening, you know. I think that I feel like, at least for me, the notion of it providing freedom, right? Like just taking care of tasks that could free me up to be, more myself, meaning, pursuing things, hobbies, or, quiet time, or I love to create stuff, if I could honestly, you know, yeah, I want to believe that it's going to create more freedom. I really do. It certainly may make people more addictive. We already know that some of these algorithms, right, are already doing that. It's hard not to think of the Matrix with them in their, little pods, like
Pods.
being.
Yes.
I'm like, whoa, that's real. what's going to
Yeah,
happen.
you're in the simulation. None of this is real.
Yes.
Maybe it's not.
What do you think?
Well, when I think of freedom, and again, I wanted to try to avoid getting political, but I remember being like driving through during the COVID times, the state that I happened to live in was very restrictive. And you could argue it was because they were doing it for public health and they needed to do that. And so it was just sort of this burden on the people that you could not go out. You couldn't go to the grocery store unless it was one person, all this kind of stuff, masks all the time, like things that I felt like were removing my freedoms. And we were driving cross country and we went into a state that did not have those restrictions. And I was sitting in a rocking chair next to some old guys I didn't even know at the Cracker Barrel waiting for my table. And I turned to this guy and I'm just enjoying, like, wow, I'm breathing air. I'm around people. I'm like outside and there's nobody like coming and hitting me with a baton telling me to go in or 6 feet or whatever. Like none of that stuff was happening. And I turned to this guy and I said, you never really appreciate your freedoms until somebody takes it from you.
True.
And so at that moment, I was like, wow, it's very like heightened defining moment for my life of realizing for me, freedom is the ability to do what you want and go where you want to go. And so does AI give us the ability to do more and go further? I would say yes, for the theoretical aspects of like, I can push myself with tasks, I can grow my career, I can do more because I have this AI at a tool or agents that'll do more for me and make me more productive, but also in the sort of like a more abstract sense of like, I can ask it for things and help myself go further than I would ever go, or I can be more brave. Like I'm going to go to a city and I'm not going to worry that I don't speak the language because I'll use this system to help me communicate or help me find my favorite restaurant or really help me enjoy the experience more. So I do think it's a double-edged sword or two-sided coin or however you were talking about it, of like, yes, technology in general can be addictive. Television can be addictive. You have to tell your kids like, hey, unplug a little bit.
Yeah.
But in general, obviously we support AI because we do this as a podcast. Like we love this technology and the advancement. So I would say if I had to vote right now in my voting in America, I'm going to vote that AI makes us more free because it's an enabler.
Yes. Good. Me too. I mean, I would support you if you voted the other way because
if I voted the other way, that AI and technology were harmful, we probably would not be having these conversations on recording on AI topics and using technology to stream it and stuff.
Yes.
So we were talking before we started on like, what are the other things you can do with AI? And I was thinking about public policy. And, I see on both sides of the political spectrum, people talking about like laws, right? Like we're talking about freedoms. What are freedoms? Freedoms are things that are given to you, even, that we say that they're given by divine, as humans, we have rights. But in general, our laws in our country are defined by even the state. Like we're talking about going from one state to the other. Those rules and those freedoms are defined by laws. Laws are created by people that write what's, public policy. When they're deciding on what they want to pass, especially when it's at the federal level, there's often these really long documents that no human could ever read. So everybody's idea, every person that, their constituents wants, they all just shove it all together and it becomes like a thing.
Those books from one building in Washington, D.C. to the next building when I was interning on campus.
Is it like a brick? Is it like literally like,
yeah.
Why printing? That alone, like so many trees.
I know.
Anyway, so I have heard people say like, oh, well, if you could summarize it and ask it questions of like, well, what does this bill say about, I don't know, my taxes this year? Or what does this bill say about what how healthcare is going to change or whatever? Chat with docs is essentially what they call that feature. So that and summarization, I think would be like, if I was an intern in like a congressman's office, I would be like, hey, anything you want to know, you want to know where it's at. It's on line 5, whatever, page 3. and then you could be more knowledgeable and you could get a leg up because you could say, hey, you didn't tell me that you put this here, but it's here and I don't agree with it, and let's change it. You could also use it to reword, like, I agree with most of it, but I have a hard time with these few words. And you could use the generative AI to help you come up with a way to keep the essence of what they're trying to say, but also make sure, because legalese like is binding, right? That you get those words refined to the best of, your objectives.
Yeah. Yes. It would help tremendously. I think it would probably flag the legislative groups who rely on these, because they like to put, they like to stuff little things into these bills. And this is sort of how stuff gets passed. So, I think it's going to be an interesting time to see our government continue to um, expand itself more digitally, and to include AI. And I mean, yes, it impacts political systems that rely on, old ways of doing things to get things done. But I mean, that's what's happening to us as people, right? Like, it's digital. I often think to myself, like, sometimes, like when I went to, take some clothes to the Goodwill, and they're like, oh, you have to use the QR code. I'm like, what?
I
Why?
hate QR codes at menus at restaurants.
Yeah.
Please
So
stop
not
doing that. I
the
do not
QR
want to have my phone to be able to see what kind of
code,
chicken sandwich you're going to have. Is
it's
it
just,
tracking? Is that why they do that? Or is that to save money on the menu printing? Which
yeah, it's just, it's
I hate it
digital. It's
anyway.
ultimately, yeah, it's ultimately, I'm sure if they're tracking something through there, and perhaps that will expand even further as, access to third party data, even if it's anonymized, becomes available to them. But it's really for ease in some cases, right? Like, it truly is easy. I mean, it's not like I haven't used it. I have. I mean, it's easy for me to pay my bill on Toast, and thank goodness I also don't have to have a login to Toast. But I'm sure they're still connecting identifiers for who I am in some way, shape.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
You know what I mean? So it's like digital. It enables speed. It enables efficiency. It enables even the expansion of ideas, right? When you're saying you're asking for it to choose a different word for you, or, we're asking for something to think different than we are used to thinking.
yes. So that was also making me think of what other thing could AI be used in relation to like America and understanding our core values, and like why are we different than the people in the other countries, and does it even matter? Does it even matter? Why does it even matter? So when you're, maybe you're an immigrant trying to get your citizenship, you're trying to take a test, right? Don't you have to know American history, or maybe you're a student and you're learning about American history. The history books, and this is actually why I didn't really like history as a child, as far as all the other subjects you would learn. It's just facts. And there's usually that this person did this, and then this country did this, and this happened on this date, and then this happened. It's all these names and these facts. But there's so much nuance underneath the surface of like, but why? And how did it affect these other people? And as you said, what's a different perspective of how somebody else might tell that story? And like, as a student, you would be able to use like a GPT type of conversational tool to ask questions, but why? Why do we have fireworks? When we put this little headband on, I was like, actually, do I know why we do fireworks other than that they're fun and pretty? Not really. If you asked me to name like 3 songs about our country, like would I be it's like those sorts of things of the why would be awesome in a learning situation to expand your knowledge and to get you like, what if we were all one country, a global country? Why is that a bad thing? Like, what are some people's thoughts on it? And all that information, you're talking about gathering information. That's really what it's about. But the scary side of that is, as soon as I'm talking, I'm like, oh, really? You're gonna trust these these tech companies are defining, as you said, like no women oversight, and like they're all rich, and like what do they even know? They're going to manipulate the story, and it's
Yeah.
not really going to be the true story. So maybe I don't want AI to tell me the context. I don't know.
That's the question. I mean, that's the question. I think we do want some of that context. I mean, we want some of that metadata to be factored in. I don't know how you weight it, or I mean, I'm sure we can get super heady on,
I'm sure there's people that know how to
yeah,
do it.
right. But
If you are and you want to reach out to us and tell
yeah,
us how people decide,
we want to know.
if it's bias and ethics and whose story wins and all of that, I would love to hear that. Hey, I'm just looking at the time. I know that you've got a hard stop. You've got some other stuff to do. I want to give you a chance to any last tips or favorite firework or 4th of July things you'd like to share before we close up.
Just make sure you vote, because
Yes.
if you can, make sure you vote. Share your voice. Think about the impact of AI, and continue to come together and unite. Look for unity instead of divide.
Yes.
So
That's
happy
my
America.
my thing too is like remember that we're the United States of America. We're not just one country. We're individuals that all have our own thoughts and feelings and you're absolutely right too about have a voice because there are people that are making decisions for us on what freedoms we can have. And COVID is a great example of like realizing how different our lives can be when policy and changes happen and the world as we know it can completely change. And you want to be able to have a say for you and for your family. The other thing I'll leave with is sparklers are fun, but they're not safe for toddlers because I have made that mistake years ago where I was like, oh, don't just hold this part. The next thing they do is they go, Sparky, fun. And then, luckily, if it's not too bad, but I think I read it's like 1,000 degrees on the end.
Holy
So,
moly.
so you definitely want to, keep your fireworks age appropriate and be safe, everyone.
Be safe. And if you are, yes, not only age appropriate, please do not set off fireworks in areas with dry grasses.
Yeah.
Yes, we're already
Follow your
fighting.
city ordinances for sure.
Oh,
Otherwise, if you would like to be interviewed on this podcast, we're always looking for people that have interesting perspectives about AI and technology or women in the workplace or anything like that. So reach out to us, follow us on LinkedIn or friend us and connect with us and look for more episodes of Butterfly Bites.
yay. Thanks,
Bye.
Damie.
Thanks for joining, Michele.
Awesome. Thank you.